Hey, this is Jamey with Stonemaier Games, and today I'm going to talk about my favorite mechanism in the new expansion, or at least new to me expansion, for Space Base, the Emergence of Shy Pluto. This is a really interesting expansion. I don't think I've played an expansion quite like it before for any other game, with maybe the closest thing being the Rise of Fenris for Scythe, because this is a story-driven expansion plus mechanisms. There are new mechanisms and story in this expansion that you unravel over a course of a certain number of games. And this is one of the things I actually find really interesting about this expansion. I'm not going to spoil anything in this video, but on the box, as far as I can tell, it does not tell you exactly how many games you're going to be playing of this expansion, and that's because the way it's designed gives players a fair amount of control over how fast they proceed through the story. There are a few points where it says, like, okay, if you do this thing, you don't actually act on it. You don't read the next story card until the end of the game. But there are others that say, like, whenever you trigger this thing, go ahead and read the next story card. So you are determining your own pace of the story and how quickly you unravel and open new mechanisms, which I think is really great. I think putting that in the hands of players is really clever. There are no branching paths in it. I think you are just the control that you have over it is the speed at which you unravel new content. But I really like that. I like that we had a little bit of control over how fast we progressed through this expansion. It took us 5 games. So I'm curious, actually, if you've played it, how many games it took you to get through the Emergence of Shy Pluto. I don't want to spoil anything in the expansion. So the only thing I will talk about is actually there's one other content layout thing about the expansion I want to talk about, but I'm going to talk about a few mechanisms that are revealed in the first game. They're revealed right away when you start playing. But before I get to that, I want to show you the rulebook. It's a fairly slim rulebook, and I really like that they managed to fit the new rules for each new section onto a single page spread. So you're not flipping through to a specific page at any given time. You're just continuing on to the next page whenever you reveal something new, and all the rules for that new content are always contained on one spread of pages, which is really nice because you can just leave that out on the table and only look at that spread of pages as you move through the rulebook. We tried to do that with the Rise of Fenris, but there were a few portions that required more content, and I admire the designer for managing to keep that content to a spread of only 2 pages for every new story beat that we hit. But for the new elements that are kind of unlocked at the very beginning, before you start the campaign, or as you start the campaign, there are these cool arrows. I like arrows in Space Base. They let you activate adjacent abilities. But I think my favorite, and for an odd reason that I'll explain in a second, is this thing. So this is variable sectors. So they all have a number on them. In Space Base, you acquire cards that have a specific number, like number 8, and that 8 goes in the 8 spot on your player mat and replaces the current number 8 card. It means whenever you roll an 8, something happens. You get to trigger the benefit there. Or when another player rolls an 8, if you've upgraded the card, you get all the bonuses from the upgraded cards. But with these variable sectors, it's your choice. You can place this card, so if you have a card with an 8+, you can place it on slot 8, 9, 10, 11, or 12. There's a card that has a 1+, so you can place it on any slot on the board. And this is really interesting. In a game that is usually very restrictive in terms of where you get to place cards, it was really interesting to me to be able to have that option of placing that 8 wherever I want. So maybe a card, like in the last game that we played, cards that were placed card number or slot number 4 simply didn't come up. I think only 1 came up the entire game. So having a card with 1+ come up would really be helpful because I could fit it into that slot where we aren't getting cards, randomly generated cards to fill in that slot. I really like that. The odd thing about this, though, is it's one of the things in games where I actually really like the restriction. I enjoy the limitation that the game is presenting to me because oftentimes I would see these numbers and I would almost ignore the cards because I didn't know where to place them. It was just like a little bit too much mental overload to decide, okay, I'm given all these options all of a sudden, where am I going to place this card? Rather than think through that and figure it out, I just went ahead and bought the 9 card or the 10 card because the game had already done the math for me and determined, okay, this card is good for the 9 slot, this card is good for the 10 slot, rather than expecting me to do that math here. So it was a weird thing where I really like this mechanism. I like the flexibility of it, and yet I rarely bought cards that used that mechanism. So a weird kind of dichotomy there. I'm sure there's a game design lesson in there somewhere. So yeah, that's my favorite mechanism in Space Base, the emergence of Shy Pluto. If anything I've said here about like how the expansion unravels, or this mechanism of unrestricting something to add a little bit of freedom in terms of what the game is offering to you, if that reminds you of any other mechanisms in any other games, I'd love to hear about your thoughts in the comments. Thanks.